we're going to do the report on the investigation into the unauthorized removal, retention, and disclosure of classified documents discovered at locations including the Penn Biden Center and the Delaware private residence of President Joseph R. Biden Jr. Special Counsel Robert K. Herr. Executive Summary. We conclude that no criminal charges are warranted in this matter. We would reach the same conclusion even if Department of Justice policy did not foreclose criminal charges against a sitting president. Our investigation uncovered evidence that President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified materials after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen. These materials included marked classified documents about military and foreign policy in Afghanistan, and notebooks containing Mr. Biden's handwritten entries about issues of national security and foreign policy implicating sensitive intelligence sources and methods. FBI agents recovered these materials from the garage, offices, and basement den in Mr. Biden's Wilmington, Delaware home. However, for the reasons summarized below, we conclude that the evidence does not establish Mr. Biden's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Prosecution of Mr. Biden is also unwarranted based on our consideration of the aggravating and mitigating factors set forth in the Department of Justice's Principles of Federal Prosecution. For these reasons, we decline prosecution of Mr. Biden. The classified documents and other materials recovered in this case spanned Mr. Biden's career in national public life. During that career, Mr. Biden has long seen himself as a historic figure. Elected to the Senate at age 29, he considered running for president as early as 1980 and did so in 1998, 2008, and 2020. He believed his record during decades in the Senate made him worthy of presidency, and he collected papers and artifacts related to significant issues and events in his career. He used these materials to write memoirs published in 2007 and 2017 to document his legacy and to cite as evidence that he was a man of presidential timber. In 2009, then Vice President Biden strongly opposed the military's plans to send more troops to Afghanistan. U.S. policy in Afghanistan was deeply important to Mr. Biden, and he labored to dissuade President Obama from escalating America's involvement there and repeating what Mr. Biden believed was a mistake akin to Vietnam. Despite Mr. Biden's advice, President Obama ordered a surge of additional U.S. troops, and Mr. Biden's views endured sharp criticism from others within and outside of the administration. But he always believed history would prove him right. He retained materials documenting his opposition to the troop surge, including a classified handwritten memo he sent President Obama over the 2009 Thanksgiving holiday, and related marked classified documents. FBI agents recovered these materials from Mr. Biden's Delaware garage and home office in December 2022 and January 2023. Also, during his 8 years as vice president, Mr. Biden regularly wrote notes by hand in notebooks. Some of these notes related to classified subjects, including the president's daily brief and National Security Council meeting, and some of the notes are themselves classified. After the vice presidency, Mr. Biden kept these classified notebooks in unsecured and unauthorized spaces at his Virginia and Delaware homes and used some of the notebooks as reference material for his second memoir, Promise Me, Dad, which was published in 2017. To our knowledge, no one has identified any classified information published in Promise Me, Dad, but Mr. Biden shared information, including some classified information from those notebooks with his ghostwriter. FBI agents recovered the notebooks from the office and basement den in Mr. Biden's Delaware home in January 2023. Marked classified documents about Afghanistan. These documents from fall 2009 have classification markings up to the top secret, sensitive, compartmented information level. They were found in a box in Mr. Biden's Delaware garage that contained other materials of great personal significance to him and that he appears to have personally used and accessed. The marked classified documents were found along with drafts of the handwritten 2009 Thanksgiving memo Mr. Biden sent President Obama in a last-ditched effort to persuade him not to send additional troops to Afghanistan. These materials were proof of the stand Mr. Biden took in what he regarded as among the most important decisions of his vice presidency. Mr. Biden wrote his 2007 and 2017 memoirs with the help of a ghostwriter. In a recorded conversation with his ghostwriter in February 2017, about a month after he left office, Mr. Biden said, while referencing his 2009 Thanksgiving memo, that he had just found all the classified stuff downstairs. At the time, he was renting a home in Virginia where he met his ghostwriter to work on his second memoir. Downstairs from where they met was Mr. Biden's office, where he stored his papers. He moved out of the Virginia home in 2019, consolidating his belongings in Delaware, where FBI agents later found marked classified documents about the Afghanistan troops surge in his garage. Evidence supports the inference that when Mr. Biden said in 2017 that he had just found all the classified stuff downstairs in Virginia, he was referring to the same marked classified documents about Afghanistan that FBI agents found in 2002 in his Delaware garage. Nevertheless, we do not believe this evidence is sufficient, as jurors would likely find reasonable doubt for one or more of several reasons. Both when he served as vice president and when the Afghanistan documents were found in Mr. Biden's Delaware garage in 2022, his possession of them in his Delaware home was not a basis for prosecution because as vice president and president, he had authority to keep classified documents in his home. The best case for charges would rely on Mr. Biden's possession of the Afghanistan documents in his Virginia home in February 2017 when he was a private citizen and when he told his ghostwriter he had just found classified material. Several defenses are likely to create reasonable doubt as to such charges. For example, Mr. Biden could have found the classified Afghanistan documents at his Virginia home in 2017 and then forgotten about them soon after. This could convince some reasonable jurors that he did not retain them willfully. When Mr. Biden told his ghostwriter about finding all the classified stuff downstairs, his tone was matter of fact. For a person who had viewed classified documents nearly every day for 8 years as vice president, including regularly in his home, finding classified documents at home less than a month after leaving office could have been an unremarkable and unforgettable event. Notably, the classified Afghanistan documents did not come up again in Mr. Biden's dozens of hours of recorded conversations with the ghostwriter or in his book, and the place where the Afghanistan documents were eventually found in Mr. Biden's Delaware garage in a badly damaged box surrounded by a household detritus suggests the documents might have been forgotten. In addition, Mr. Biden's memory was significantly limited both during his recorded interviews with the ghostwriter in 2017 and in his interview with our office in 2023. And his cooperation with our investigation, including by reporting to the government that the Afghanistan documents were in his Delaware garage, will likely convince some jurors that he made an innocent mistake rather than acting willfully, that is, with intent to break the law, as the statute requires. Another viable defense is that Mr. Biden might not have retained the classified Afghanistan documents in his Virginia home at all. They could have been stored by mistake and without his knowledge at his Delaware home since the time he was vice president, as were other classified documents recovered during our investigation. This would rebut charges that he willfully retained the documents in Virginia. Given Mr. Biden's limited precision and recall during this interview with his ghostwriter and with our office, Jurors may hesitate to place too much evidentiary weight on a single 8-word utterance to his ghostwriter about finding classified documents in Virginia. In the absence of other, more direct evidence, we searched for additional evidence and found it wanting. In particular, no witness, photo, email, text exchange, or any other evidence conclusively places the Afghanistan documents at the Virginia home in 2017. In addition to this shortage of evidence, there are other innocent explanations for the documents that we cannot refute. When Mr. Biden told his ghostwriter he just found all the classified stuff downstairs, he could have been referring to something other than the Afghanistan documents, and a report discusses these possibilities in detail. We have also considered that, at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, as a sympathetic, well-meaning, elderly man with a poor memory. Based on our direct interactions with and observations of him, he is someone for whom many jurors will want to identify reasonable doubt. It would be difficult to convince a jury that they should convict him, by then a former president well into his 80s, of a serious felony that requires a mental state of willfulness. We conclude the evidence is not sufficient to convict, and we decline to recommend prosecution of Mr. Biden for his retention of the classified Afghanistan documents. Notebooks containing classified information. FBI agents recovered from unlocked drawers in the office and basement den of Mr. Biden's Delaware home a set of notebooks he used as vice president. Evidence shows that he knew the notebooks contained classified information. Mr. Biden wrote down obviously sensitive information discussed during intelligence briefings with President Obama and meetings in the White House Situation Room about matters of national security and military and foreign policy. And while reading his notebook entries aloud during meetings with his ghostwriter, Mr. Biden sometimes skipped over presumptively classified material and warned his ghostwriter the entries might be classified. But at least 3 times Mr. Biden read from classified entries aloud to his ghostwriter nearly verbatim. Some evidence also suggests Mr. Biden knew he could not keep classified handwritten notes at home after leaving office. Mr. Biden, who had decades of experience with classified information, was deeply familiar with the measures taken to safeguard classified information and the need for those measures to prevent harm to national security. Asked about reports that former President Trump had kept classified documents at his own home, Mr. Biden wondered how anyone could be that irresponsible, and voiced concerns about what data was in there and that may compromise sources and methods. While vice president, he kept his notebooks in a White House safe for a time, in contrast with his decision after leaving office to keep them at home in unlocked drawers. When Mr. Biden left office, he also knew his staff decided to store note cards containing his classified notes in a secure compartmented information facility at the National Archives, and he knew his notebooks contained the same type of classified information. As he told his ghostwriter during a recorded interview, the same staff who arranged to secure his classified note cards didn't even know he had retained possession of his classified notebooks. Twice in 2017, Mr. Biden visited the National Archives to review his classified note cards while writing his book, yet he kept his notebooks, which also contained classified information, in unlocked drawers at home. He had strong motivation to do so and to ignore the rules for properly handling the classified information in his notebooks. He consulted the notebooks liberally during hours of discussing with his ghostwriter and viewed them as highly private and valued possessions with which he was unwilling to part. We do not, however, believe this evidence would meet the government's burden of trial, particularly the requirement to prove that Mr. Biden intended to do something the law forbids. Consistent with statements Mr. Biden made during our interview of him and arguments made by the White House Counsel and Mr. Biden's personal counsel, we expect Mr. Biden's defense at trial would be that he thought his notebooks were his personal property and he was allowed to take them home, even if they contained classified information. During our interview of him, Mr. Biden was emphatic, declaring that his notebooks are my property and that every president before me has done the exact same thing, that is, kept handwritten classified materials after leaving office. He also cited the diaries that President Reagan kept in his private home after leaving office, noting that they included classified information. Contemporaneous evidence suggests that when Mr. Biden left office in 2017, he believed he was allowed to keep the notebooks in his home. In a recorded conversation with his ghostwriter in 2017, Mr. Biden explained that despite his staff's views to the contrary, he did not think he was required to turn in his note cards to the National Archives, where they were stored in a SCIF, and he had not wanted to do so. At trial, he would argue plausibly that he thought the same about his notebooks. If this is what Mr. Biden thought, we believe he was mistaken about what the law permits, but this view finds some support in historical practice. The clearest example is President Reagan, who left the White House in 1989 with 8 years of worth of handwritten diaries, which he appeared to have kept at his California home, even though they contained top-secret information. During criminal litigation involving a former Reagan administration official in 1989 and 1990, the Department of Justice stated in public court filings that the currently classified diaries were Mr. Reagan's personal records. Yet, we know of no steps the department or other agencies took to investigate Mr. Reagan for mishandling classified information or to retrieve or secure his diaries. Most jurors would likely find evidence of this precedent and Mr. Biden's claimed reliance on it, which we expect would be admitted at trial, to be compelling evidence that Mr. Biden did not act willfully. As with the marked classified documents, because the evidence is not sufficient to convict Mr. Biden for willfully retaining the documents and notebooks, we decline prosecution. We also considered whether Mr. Biden willfully disclosed national defense information to his ghostwriter by reading aloud certain classified notebook passages to his ghostwriter nearly verbatim on at least 3 occasions. Mr. Biden should have known that by reading his unfiltered notes about classified meetings in the Situation Room, he risked sharing classified information with his ghostwriter, but the evidence does not show that when Mr. Biden shared the specific passages with his ghostwriter, Mr. Biden knew the passages were classified and intended to share classified information. Mr. Biden's lapses in attention and vigilance demonstrate why former officials should not keep classified material unsecured at home and read them aloud to others, but jurors could well conclude that Mr. Biden's actions were unintentional. We therefore decline to charge Mr. Biden for disclosure of these passages to his ghostwriter.
Principles of federal prosecution. We have also evaluated all relevant considerations in aggravating and mitigation, as outlined in the Justice Manual, and determined that on balance, these factors do not support prosecution of Mr. Biden. Historically, after leaving office, many former presidents and vice presidents have knowingly taken home sensitive material related to national security from their administrations without being charged with crimes. The historical record is important context for judging whether and why to charge a former vice president and former president, as Mr. Biden would be when susceptible to prosecution for similar actions taken by several of his predecessors. With one exception, there is no record of the Department of Justice prosecuting a former president or vice president for mishandling classified documents from his own administration. The exception is former President Trump. It is not our role to assess the criminal charges pending against Mr. Trump, but several materials distinction between Mr. Trump's case and Mr. Biden's are clear. Unlike the evidence involving Mr. Biden, the allegations set forth in the indictment of Mr. Trump, if proven, would present serious aggravating facts. Most notably, after being given multiple chances to return classified documents and avoid prosecution, Mr. Trump allegedly did the opposite. According to the indictment, he not only refused to return the documents for many months, but he also obstructed justice by enlisting others to destroy evidence and then to lie about it. In contrast, Mr. Biden turned in classified documents to the National Archives and the Department of Justice.
consented to the search of multiple locations, including his homes, sat for a voluntary interview, and in other ways cooperated with the investigation. In reaching our decision, we did not consider every circumstance in which criminal charges against a former president or vice president for mishandling classified information may be warranted, but on the facts of this case, the fundamental interests of society do not require criminal charges against Mr. Biden. For this additional reason, applying the principles of federal prosecution set forth in the Justice Manual, we decline prosecution. The practices of retaining classified material in unsecured locations and reading classified materials to one's ghostwriter present serious risk to national security, given a vulnerability of extraordinarily sensitive information to loss or compromise to America's adversaries. The department routinely highlights such risk when pursuing classified mishandling prosecutions, but addressing those risks through criminal charges, the only means available to this office, is not the proper remedy here. Other classified materials. For other recovered classified documents, after a thorough investigation, the decision to decline criminal charges was straightforward. The FBI recovered additional marked classified documents at the Penn Biden Center, elsewhere in Mr. Biden's Delaware home, and in the collection of his Senate papers at the University of Delaware. But the evidence suggests that Mr. Biden did not willfully retain these documents, and that they could plausibly have been brought to these locations by mistake. We also investigated whether persons other than Mr. Biden knowingly mishandled these classified documents, and our investigation showed that they did not. In reaching these conclusions, we note the numerous previous instances in which marked classified documents have been discovered intermixed with the personal papers of former executive branch officials and members of Congress. Mr. Biden's ghostwriter and destruction of evidence. After learning of the special counsel's appointment in this matter, Mr. Biden's ghostwriter deleted audio recordings he had created of his discussions with Mr. Biden during the writing of Mr. Biden's 2017 memoir. The recordings had significant evidentiary value. After telling the special counsel's office what he had done, the ghostwriter turned over his computer and external hard drive and consented to their search. Based on the FBI's analysis, it appears the FBI recovered all deleted audio files related to the memoir, though portions of a few of the files appear to be missing, which is possible when forensic tools are used to recover deleted files. The ghostwriter kept and did not delete or attempt to delete his near verbatim transcripts of the recordings and produced those transcripts to us, including for each of the incomplete recovered files. We considered whether to charge the ghostwriter with obstruction of justice, but we believed the evidence would be insufficient to obtain a conviction and therefore declined to prosecute him. While the ghostwriter admitted that he deleted the recordings after he learned of the special counsel's investigation, the evidence falls short of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that he intended to impede an investigation, which is the intent required by law. In his interviews, the ghostwriter offered plausible, innocent reasons for why he deleted the recordings. He also preserved his transcripts that contained some of the most incriminating information against Mr. Biden, including his statement about finding all the classified stuff downstairs in 2017, which is inconsistent with an intent to impede an investigation by destroying evidence. And the ghostwriter voluntarily produced to investigators his notes and the devices from which the recordings were recovered. For these reasons, we believe that the admissible evidence would not suffice to obtain a conviction of the ghostwriter for obstruction of justice. On balance, relevant aggravating and mitigating factors also do not support his prosecution. All right. I'm going to stop there. If you guys watch this video enough and listen to it long enough, I'll gladly keep reading more, because this is about 300 pages. Peace.